History with Mike and Will. I'm Mike.
And he is Mike.
That is true.
And I'm Will.
That is process of deduction.
I think.
And here's what we do. As every week, Will picks an event from history, and then he goes and researches it, and then he has 1 hour to explain that event to me.
This many.
All right. So which event are we talking about today,
This
Will?
week is the Battle of Megiddo.
Battle of Megiddo.
Megiddo.
I have no idea what
Nobody does.
language of origin that's from, much less what it's about.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And that was 16th April, 1457 BC.
BC, all right.
So, like more than 3,500 years ago.
I bet there's going to be swords.
There will be.
All right, you've got 1 hour. Will, ready?
I'm ready. Okay, so the Battle of Megiddo. This involves Egypt.
Okay.
Egypt. This is Egypt during the time of its new kingdom, which tells you how old Egypt was, because this is like the last one of their latest kingdoms. They had like the early days, which I'm not going to get into it because it's like there's intermediary periods and all this other stuff. But this is the really famous chunk of Egyptian history where it's referred to as an empire.
Okay.
New kingdom.
Is this before or after pyramids?
This is during pyramids.
They're
pyramids. Making pyramids. Right. The Temple of Karnak is a major feature of our story. The reason
Temple of Karnak?
The Temple of Karnak. That's where like half of our information about that's the Valley of Kings.
Yeah, okay.
Where everybody's buried.
I'm just remembering an old Johnny Carson bit.
Oh.
It's for the
Oh, okay.
a gag for the older folks.
Do you want to do the bit?
He was the amazing Karnak, and he would be able to predict.
Oh, was that the? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I thought.
The amazing Karnak.
Sure. Sorry. Yeah.
It's fine.
With the turban.
Yeah.
And the feather.
Yeah.
That was a great bit.
Sure.
That was a great bit.
All right.
Very clever. Okay. I didn't know he called it the Great Karnak.
Well, his name's Johnny Carson.
Okay. Well, this is spelled differently. This is Karnak, or in Egyptian, I think it's just a drawing of a pyramid and a guy.
There you go.
Because
type that into your Google browser.
Good luck. They don't have hieroglyphs. But what is amazing about this is we get all of these specific times because they carved it in stone.
Oh, better than paper.
And this is great. And to get an idea, I mentioned to Mike before we started filming this is that I had to study a little bit about astronomy and time in general and how things are labeled throughout history with dates and such.
Oh, okay.
The Egyptian calendar is really fascinating because it has like the same number of days in it as a Julian calendar, which is what we use now. Mm-hmm. Well, Gregorian now. It's the same thing, but roughly. And with like a half a day difference. So over a long period of time, it's like 1 year off.
Yeah.
But their cycles are like 1,461 years, and that equals like 1,460 years according to the Julian calendar. So if you can figure out a specific date in their calendar, then you can line it up with a specific date using a different calendar, and you can actually like extrapolate from that what it is, with a potential difference of 20 years. And the reason why is this is
leap year.
Kind of. This is based on what they call the heliacal rise of Sothis. I think Sothis is like a specific star.
Okay. Heliac goes sun. Something.
Helia. Yes. It's the rise of a specific star thing.
Right.
And it was recorded as on this specific day. They're like, okay, this is the start of this cycle.
Boom.
And it was very specific, but the problem is they didn't record exactly where the guy who recorded the day was standing. They didn't record the latitude. So he was either standing in the Nile Delta, so the cities of like Memphis, or what would be eventually like where Cairo is.
Okay.
Not Memphis, Tennessee.
I assume.
That's where they got the name from.
Right.
Memphis. But I do love the idea of Elvis the Pharaoh. That just kind of...
I bet he would love that idea as well.
I think that's why they did that in Joseph.
I'm the king, baby.
I think that might be why they did it in the Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, is that Elvis is the Pharaoh.
Yeah, okay.
Although I don't know that they were that smart that they knew the city was Memphis, but maybe they were. I don't know. So it was either somewhere in the Nile Delta or the city of Thebes, and those are far enough apart that depending on where the guy stood, over time it's a 20-year difference.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In rendering the date.
Sure.
So this event either happened on 1457 or I think 1477. I think it's older, and then they have it called like the high and the low calendar. So we're basing it off the low calendar, which is just like the low estimate of how far along it was. So that's where we're at. That's explaining how we get. But it's really cool because they state like on the day of this guy's 21st year of the 6th year of or the 6th month of that and the 3rd day of that month. They're very specific about dates in Egypt, which is really cool because in a lot of like European history, we're like, this?
Because we wrote things on paper.
They wrote it on paper. Well, the Egyptians, what they did is they wrote it on papyrus first, and then they went ding, 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 and they put it in stone, which is awesome. And it's really funny because some of the Egyptian stuff, like we found jokes and like there's, insults and drawn out in detail. And
do you have an example of an Egyptian joke?
I'm going to double check it, but I heard a comedian talk about how he heard about the first joke was an Egyptian guy.
Yeah.
Craig Ferguson's the comedian who said it, and I trust him. But apparently the first joke recorded was written down, and it was an older hunter is talking to a young man. He's going through his trophy room, and he says, "This is the lion, and I hunted the lion, and I fired the bow and hit him right between the eyes. I killed him. I put him on the wall." Like, cool, that's awesome. What's this? He says, "This is the alligator, and I saw the alligator in the swamp, and it came out of the swamp, and I pulled out my bow, and I shot him in the eye, and it was great." And the guy's like, cool. And this, and he goes, the rhino, and I came out of the plains, and he charged me, and I pulled my bow, and I fiddled it around, and I dropped it, and I crapped my pants. And he goes, "How did that kill the lion?" He goes, "No," or the rhino. He goes, No, I just crapped my pants right now. It's not a good joke. But apparently that's the first recorded.
Yeah, all right.
According to Craig Ferguson, who is a brilliant comic, who I shouldn't trust. So you can well actually me this. I'm actually going to go and dig around in that. That was one thing I wanted to check, and I just completely forgot. Right. But they would write notes. The Romans were notorious for writing notes too like that. They would write horrible insults to people. And in the city of Pompeii, after it was recovered from the volcano eruption, it preserved like the graffiti, and they had like bathroom stall graffiti, and it was like "for a good time called Decius," kind of a thing. It was, and lots of phalluses, and I think they invented the poop emoji, like they or the Egyptians, but they would write a lot of stuff down. So that's what's really cool about the Egyptians is that we get this amazing record preserved. Now, obviously, it's from the winning side.
Sure.
Usually, but they did write down.
Right as a winner.
Yeah, they did write down some of their losses as well, and it's as reliable or more reliable than a lot of later stuff because of how well maintained it was. And it's really cool to have like Egyptologists nowadays go, "Holy moly, we didn't even know this happened.
Yeah,
this is amazing," and they kept a lot of the stuff. So one of the things that people did back then is if you fought a war, you kept spoils, you kept stuff you took from the enemy, and that was all sides. Everybody did it, and they're like, "We won."
Yep.
Well, the kings would be buried with those goods as because they're supposed to bring it with them to the afterlife.
Yeah. That always seemed like the oddest practice.
Yes. Well, they didn't know anything about death, and they're like, "Well, he's the king. Let him have his. If he goes to the afterlife without stuff, no one's gonna know he's the king."
Okay.
And then we talked about this in I forget which episode. It was a couple episodes ago, but it was during Salah ad-Din's reign. The way that the Egyptians then, which is 2,000 years after this, got money is they just looted the tombs.
Yeah.
So it's like they had these gold mines of some old dude stuff that he took from somebody else, and then he died, and they sent him off to heaven with it. They're like, "Well, that's nonsense. The gold's still there. Look, get it."
He's gone now.
Imagine if that was true, though, and you had your burial goods, and then you're in heaven, and then you're like, "Where's my stuff? Somebody is still alive and taking my crap. Come on! I was super rich for so long."
What would you need it for in heaven?
I don't know. You got to be a king, to be better than everybody.
I am suspect of Egyptian religion.
I am too. I'm suspect of all religion, but especially anything where it's like, yeah, you get money when you die. That doesn't sound like heaven. That sounds like a job. That sounds like there's inequality.
I would hope that
in paradise, and I don't like. That doesn't sound like paradise at all. That just sounds like here again.
Again,
I don't want that. Can I go to the other place? That sounds at least like a meritocracy. I don't.
Everyone gets a hot poker right up the.
Everybody's treated fairly here in hell. So the idea being, we've got a great record of all these things that they went through. Now, our main character for this is Thutmose III. Thutmose would be how it's probably pronounced, but it's Thutmose. Thutmose. So, Thoth. It's hard to pronounce it because it's TH, like OTH, and it's Thoth, and that's one of their gods. It's an Egyptian god.
Okay.
So Thutmose is like the born of this guy, or like an embodiment of him, because they believe the pharaohs were reincarnations of their first pharaohs and thus their gods.
Sure.
So the first pharaohs were all gods, according to their thing.
Hard to disprove.
Now, he was 2 when his dad died. His dad was Thutmose the second. Yep. And guess what his dad's name was?
Just plain Thutmose.
Thutmose. But they call him the 1 because Thutmose the 1, and then the 2, and then the 3. Because once you get beyond that, you need to label which Thutmose you are. And his mother was Hatshepsut. Oh my God.
Shit.
Hatshepsut.
Okay.
But yeah, Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut. And she was a pharaoh, and she was a badass, and she's probably going to get her own episode someday.
Okay.
She was famous, and she was great, and she ruled well. The problem being that...
she was a woman.
no, they actually were fine with that.
Oh, okay.
The problem was that she was the regent for the majority of Thutmose's childhood, and he wanted to be king.
Oh, okay.
He didn't kill her or anything crazy like that, but eventually he got I want to go do stuff as the king, and I can't while she's around.
Oh.
But he was set up to be her general. He was in charge of the field. He was in charge of the field command, not from the age of 2, obviously, but he was trained up. And back then, the pharaohs were famous as warrior kings. You did not just lead. You led from the front with a sword and a shield, and you put your body on the line. And
I suppose if you believe that you're a god, no problem.
Yep. Well, and also, you better show it. You better demonstrate it. So they got trained. I mean, he might have been 2, and they were like, all right, here's the spear. Go fight that alligator.
Ooh, hard to lift.
It's a tiny baby.
Yeah.
They would have been trained from a young age with various military experts, scholars, people who could teach them how to run a country. They were crafted, or it's a word that people like to use right nowadays, but he was groomed from a young age for kingship.
Yeah.
And Hatshepsut, oh my God, that's such a hard one to say. Hatshepsut. I practiced this a lot earlier, and now I can't say it. Hatshepsut was a very powerful woman, and she was a good leader. Now, the interesting thing is she's his stepmother and his aunt.
Oh.
Because inbreeding was the thing you did.
Yeah.
She was married to Thutmose, who was also her half-brother.
Okay.
And before that, it's the same thing going way, way back. You must
This
preserve the bloodline.
This is
people.
similar to other royalty-led.
Yep. And the pharaohs at this time, though, it is a hardcore... Our family tree is straight down. Yeah. It's just a line. That's because supposedly they tracked them back to gods. Yep. So you want to all be related to the gods. Yeah. So it's a lot of brother and sister, and it
makes family reunions easier.
A common practice was to take concubines, so it would be half sister, half brother. So it's a little more diluted and a little less gross, but still incredibly like we know nowadays. Don't breed your children together. Yeah. Eventually they'll come out with no chin, and they'll look like the British royal family.
But they didn't know any of this. It was almost 3,000 years ago.
This was a very long time ago, and apparently this was before people got too inbred because they still looked like human beings after generations of doing this. So good job on not being just an amorphous pile. Okay. Good job.
It's hard to meet new people.
It takes so long to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, Thutmose, after he comes of age and he becomes sole ruler when he's 21 years old.
Okay. And he can drink.
His stepmom dies, and he is the sole ruler, and he's like, I've got to deal with a lot of stuff right now. Because once she's gone, Hatshepsut, there we go, Hatshepsut.
Now she's out of our story.
Yep, and I just screwed it up again. But once she's gone, it kind of sends a little shockwave through the kingdom. Sure. Like anytime a king or queen dies, you're like, aha!
Mm. We should have planned for this. We should have known.
Yes. Well, and they did, but somebody thought this was a sign of weakness in the royal family. I'm going to take advantage. Yeah. And that guy we don't know his name, so the Egyptians thought so little of him.
I'm going to guess he failed.
They did not even bother writing this dude's name down, but he was the king of Kadesh. Kadesh is a city in what is modern-day Syria. Okay. They were a client state, meaning they were conquered or had to pay tribute to the Egyptians at this time. So the Egyptians run the area.
Okay. Is Syria in Africa?
No, Syria
In Europe.
is by Israel.
Okay.
So they call it
right
the
there in the-
Near East.
Right there in the Fertile Crescent.
So, yes. So where Africa hooks up
Yeah.
to the east and then links up with Europe, that's Syria's in there with
Yeah.
Jordan, Israel, Arabia.
Yeah, put a map right there.
There. So Kadesh is not directly inside of Egypt, but it's considered part of like what they control, what is their empire. And there's a bunch of smaller client states in there. Now, this is a time where kingdoms were usually pretty small, and a king was just somebody who could see from one end to the other and was like, that's mine.
All you can see is yours.
It's everything the light touches.
Yeah, that's the line.
That. Yep. And everything the light touched was theirs, kind of a thing. Except that they were like, oh, Egypt's
the hyena part.
way bigger and way meaner than us, and we better, they've conquered us already, so we owe them. Now, this is a time before the Israelites even arrive.
Oh.
They're not a thing yet. The Israelites' first recording is in Egypt, and that's in like the 13th century BC. So they're not around for like 200 years.
200.
But
So
these
close,
are
relatively
all what
speaking.
are called Canaanites. Canaanites are just the people who live in that region.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that Near East region. That's where everybody has been killing everybody else forever. But back at this time, this is before it's considered like a holy land. It is just a major trade hub because it links going from Egypt to Greece.
Yeah,
and
it's right
Greece
there
is
in the
and Greece is a major
Mediterranean.
powerhouse at this time. It's a center of art and culture. So is Egypt. So everything in between those places, and then you have Babylon over to the east, which is where modern day Baghdad is, in Iraq. So these are like major civilizations, and this is right in the middle. So it's an important region, and the king of Kadesh knows it's an important region. He's like, mine. I want it. I'm gonna control it now.
Okay.
That queen's dead, and I don't like her. I can't say her name. She's gone.
He's a king. We don't know what his
And
name
there's
is.
a
though.
stupid 20-something king, which is like 40 back then.
Sure,
It's still
yeah.
pretty young, actually. Like, so he's in the prime of his life, but he's untested as a sole ruler. So Kadesh thinks we're going to assert authority. Now, in order to do that, we're going to need some friends. And one of the other friends is the city of Megiddo. Now, Megiddo is a fortress. It is a fortress on a hill. It's called it's called a tell nowadays. A tell, like Tel Aviv, and Tel Megiddo is another one, is basically a pile of civilizations built one on top of the other over time. When one city crumbles, a new one is built on top of it, and it creates sort of a man-made hill. They're huge sources for archaeologists and anthropological knowledge. People dig these, and they're like, "This is amazing. We found so much information."
I was in Iraq and walking around on just pottery.
Yep.
It's like a pit of.
Oh, were you in Baghdad?
Yeah.
So you probably Saddam, before he got ousted, was digging up Babylon.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you were in like the oldest city of ever.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I never got to go there while I was in Iraq because I was a soldier.
Yeah.
Soldiers don't get to tourist.
I was
Usually,
an entertainer.
you were an entertainer.
Entertaining
You
the
get to
troops.
see stuff. You get the privilege.
I was
darn
still
it.
entertaining the troops, though.
Yeah, you should be.
That's like a soldier.
That's important.
A
honestly.
soldier of comedy.
Honestly, that's really important.
And I got to step on pottery.
If you don't keep soldier spirits up, we get really cranky and cause problems. Look
Oh,
at
sure.
half of our history stuff is, well, the soldiers got bored, so they just started looting stuff. They're like, we need a comedian. Don't tell political jokes.
You're welcome.
And yeah, I didn't see you. I don't care, but I would have probably laughed.
Sure.
We were really hard up for entertainment, so you could have just walked on and go, yay, person that's not in a uniform.
I didn't do much more than that, but yes.
Well, Tutmost did. Tutmost did the Tutmost.
I don't know if that was the place for that one, but all right.
No,
Keep going.
Yeah, that would have been at the end when we know that he actually has accomplished it. So this region also is called the Levant, or the Levant.
Levant.
That's actually true.
Okay.
What the pronunciation?
That sounds French.
Levant, and that's what Europe largely called it.
Oh, sounds French.
It does sound French. Levant.
Yeah.
It is Levant. Oh, ouais. Tutmosis knows that these guys are rising against him. This has been an issue before. They're not a happy client state. Nobody really is. And they're kind of sending out feelers to different powerful countries and empires to be like, can we team up with you guys instead? Specifically the Hittites. The Hittites were perfectly named because they were really good at hitting things. They were a very warlike empire of what is called Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. Okay. They were warriors. They were famous for chariot archers. But they're in the ascent right now. They're not a major power. Like, they become like a hugely powerful empire that rivals Egypt. But this is like early days. They are an amalgamation of tribes and groups, and they are powerful, but and a potential rival.
Sure.
But not like we're gonna, ride into Egypt.
So a couple of hits, but not the greatest hits come later.
Not the greatest hits. They're not the greatest Hittites. Right. So Kadesh is like, maybe we can ally with them. Maybe we can ally with these guys.
Sure. Yeah.
Thutmose finds out about this. Now they have to weather the storm. Kadesh needs more allies, so he gets the city of Megiddo, it's also considered a kingdom. Okay. Think of it more like a city-state at the time. You have one really powerful city, and then all the villages that feed it.
Yeah.
Basically. Kadesh is the same. Both are very powerful fortresses, and they are laid out on a road called, what is it? It's the Via Maris is what we call it now, and that means the way of the sea. Okay. So that's like a modern version of what we call it.
A road?
But it is the pathway that you would take to go from Egypt to Mesopotamia.
Because wasn't the Roman thing? Then they built the roads?
They built a lot of roads. Other people had roads. Okay. Like, Romans aren't the only people who were like, we should have a place to walk.
Yeah.
But they did build the best ones because they're still around.
Okay.
Which is awesome.
I mean, I suppose any...
And I think the Romans eventually paved a chunk of this because the Romans controlled this region eventually too. But this would have been like the general trade route, take caravans, because it's safer than taking ships over the Mediterranean, which is not always a reliable body of water.
Sure.
And back then, all you had were basically rowboats with a sail. I mean, some of the boats were pretty impressive by our standards. They'd have the triremes, but that's later. Yeah. And any ship is not made to go like straight across. You have to sail along the coast anyway, and that's all rocky and shallow and weird. And if you're not really good at it, you just die.
You drown. Yeah.
Yeah.
On the road, if you trip and fall, you just fall.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot. It takes longer, but it's safer.
Okay.
So they kind of have to weigh the two together. So Megiddo is like right on top of this trade route. So if they just go, no, you can't pass it, that kills all trade between Greece and Egypt. And that's like their lifeblood to the north. They need that. Now, Egypt is very powerful, very wealthy for kind of the same reasons we talked about in a previous one, where they have this incredibly fertile valley around the Nile River.
Fertile Crescent.
It is... Yeah, and that's part of the Fertile Crescent as it cuts across there.
I just like saying that.
You do just like saying that. And then there's where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, and there's this stretch where it's just lots grows there. Yeah. But this specifically, it's just amazing. Like, super fertile. They can just grow all the food.
All day, all the food.
So that's why, I think the Egyptians invented beer.
Ooh.
So they have so much grain. They're like, this grain got old. It tastes not great, but I don't feel pain no more. And apparently one of the reasons why they made the beer is they keep the slaves kind of docile and drunk, but also able to endure some pain and hardship and just put big rocks on top of big rocks on top of.
I had read a book about the beer, making of beverages, history of beverages in general. The early beer, they wouldn't filter out the stuff. They would just have the oats and whatever, the grain still floating out. You had to drink with a reed straw through it.
Oh, that would work. Also, you get food.
Sure.
You're like, just booze filled. It's booze porridge.
Delicious.
Probably tastes awful. But you're like, I need calories. I don't care. I don't care where they come from.
I'm sure they said I need calories.
I need there. Me hungry need food. In cool Egyptian dialect.
Here's my grocery list. I could chisel it on.
Just shows the guy doing the shopping cart and things in the cart later.
We have no paper, but we do have shopping carts.
But we do have shopping carts. Well, it's made of metal, so it lasts. All right, so Thutmose knows this is a problem.
Yeah.
If his trade gets shut off, he's in trouble.
Yep.
He'll have to go around it. It'll be an issue. He doesn't want to deal with all that crap.
Yes.
Also, he really likes the idea of expanding the empire. That is his responsibility.
Everyone does.
That's his responsibility as leader. And these guys are causing a massive disruption. So, and he's got people that live in the region. So he's got like loyal cities. These aren't all like, oh, we're treated like slaves and it's horrible and we're abused. They have like Egyptian colonists who live there, or people who just are happy under the Egyptian empire because it gives them some stability and calm. And these guys are rebelling because they want to run it themselves. And again, it's probably the king just wants the money.
Probably.
It's not usually the people going, yeah, let's go to war. It's a democratic process. Great.
Right. The people just want to farm.
The people just want to people like they do nowadays. It's the same. People are all the same. Like they just want today to be the same or a little better than yesterday, and tomorrow to be the same or a little better than today. Yeah. They just want it. They don't want to change a lot. Yeah. You know, so that's why we run into so many problems in history. Is people like, I don't like change, because we don't. Yeah. Change is difficult.
Especially if you got it nice.
Yeah, especially when you're comfortable. These people have like cities and villages, and they just work, and there's not as much of a problem of raiders and rival countries, because you're going to get smashed by the Egyptians if you attack.
Yeah, all good.
So they're living okay. So when Thutmose is like wants to deal with this, he's got allies in the area. So he takes an army and marches to Gaza, which is where Gaza is nowadays. Yeah. And they're totally loyal to him still. Like, hey, thank God, you're here, because these guys are jerks and we got nothing to do with that. We are totally on Egypt's side. Also, Gaza is probably a little like, we're much closer to Egypt than these people. Yeah. So if we make them mad, they just steamroll us to get to you.
Okay, so you're my friends then.
So it's probably a combination of being pragmatic and realistic, and then also maybe they had it pretty good. You know, trade's good, food's coming in, not a lot of problems, and especially in that time in history where some places people just literally live in tents and that's their society, or you live in a nice city with constant protection and you don't have to fight the planet to stay alive. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, sounds nice.
And there's arguments to be made either way which one works. But in this part of the world, I'm sorry, it's a desert. I would rather live in a stone building that is cool and has shade and a steady water supply than meandering through desert wasteland going, I hope all the sheep live or I'm going to die. Yeah. That sounds like hell.
That does sound tricky.
So if I'm the people in Gaza, I'm like, yeah, Egypt, you guys are great. You guys make all the food. Keep doing the thing. Sure, this is wonderful. So Thutmose raises an army. Now, the Egyptians' army is a little different than everybody else's. Most people at this time are like, hey, we need people. You've got 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 feet. Yeah, you. What? You're a farmer? Here's a stick with a pokey end. Come on. Before Thutmose became king, I think it was either his grandfather or one generation before that even. It would have been his great-grandfather then. Amenhotep believed that the Egyptians should have a proper military who were trained, not just kind of haphazard, come and fight. And they'd been through some tumult, some strife in their country. There was this time where people called the Hyksos, who were allegedly, they're actually Canaanites. So people from where they're invading now came to their country and conquered a chunk of it, and they were considered like foreign rulers. But there's some debate about whether they were foreign rulers or and hated, or if they were just kind of the old kingdom collapsed and this was the new ruling class that came up, and then maybe later on people were like, oh, they're foreigners, totally hate them. Okay. But they eventually are driven out of power, and it becomes like a thing in Egypt where it's like, we also need a strong military because people will invade. It also tends to keep the monarchy honest, because they have like a strong military that supports them. But if they're like a despot and they're horrible, the soldiers might be like, this is not good, and overthrow them.
So they were okay and purposely organized to do a military coup if
not
they needed
necessarily, but to have like a sense of a belief in the nation.
Okay.
And loyalty to the people and to the concept of the pharaohs and kingship. So the pharaohs still have full control. Okay. But if they are doing like un-pharaoh-y things, the gods have like a specific way the gods are supposed to act. They're supposed to be benevolent dictators. The concept is they are better than us, they are of the gods, and therefore they have a responsibility.
But if they don't treat us nice enough.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, there's an argument to be made about the concept of the benevolent dictator, of somebody who is actually genuinely smarter, better, more suited to rule. As long as they actually do it, humanity has shown that works pretty well. That's why, like on small scale especially, like your team leader at work, that's a benevolent dictator. It's not a democracy. They're put in charge. But even in democratic situations, like in America, Washington was put in charge because he was the best at the thing, and he could be conceived as or construed as a benevolent dictator if he had wanted to be. Right. Some people even offered him the crown. And that makes you a dictator, like you're in charge. And the idea of dictator, the original word, was a guy chosen by the people to run everything because he was the most suited for it. It was an elected position in Rome, was to run things because stuff is crazy.
Yep.
We're suspending everything, and we're picking the most reliable guy we have to run it. Now, if you pick a bad guy, you're screwed. You're unbelievably, without a doubt, going down the tube of history, and you're done.
That's tricky.
But for the most part, when like the Romans did it, they picked really well, and it was a consensus to go, okay, we're going to argue too much. We need somebody to just stamp through this, and we're done.
Yeah.
So the Egyptians had this hierarchical system where the monarch was chosen, but was not chosen by God, was of God, was descended from them, but had a responsibility to the people, and the people had a responsibility to the leadership. I'm in charge, but that means I protect you. I ensure you're fed. Because like everything that went wrong in the country was blamed on the pharaoh.
Oh, yeah.
And everything that went right in the country was blamed on the pharaoh. Because you're a god.
You're a god. Thanks for nothing.
Why is there no food? God's fault. Why is there tons of food? God's fault. Why is there water? God's fault. Why is there no water? God's fault.
Sounds great.
So it's intrinsically linked. So if you're a bad god, the army might be like, think it's time we replace you.
No. But that's got to be a tough call to make, though.
Yeah, and I
hope I'm right.
It did not typically happen.
Yeah.
This is very, very rare. But I think having this concept of a strong military directly under you will give you pause if you're like, yeah, I'll go kill all the people. They're my family. I'm not killing them. I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
You're crazy. So it builds the concept of a nation rather than just some dude on a chair telling everybody what to do. Yeah. It is a dude on a chair telling everybody what to do, but with massive responsibility. And that's a huge difference. Like there's that nuance of just somebody telling you what to do and not feeling they owe anybody.
Right.
And he's like, I am in charge, and that means I have a huge debt to my people. It's my job to make sure they're all okay, except the slaves probably. The slaves don't matter. You
make
just
sure
go to,
make sure they're fed at least.
Go to war and you get more slaves.
Okay.
Also, at this time, I don't know exactly how major slavery was.
Okay.
Like I think it became much more normalized later. This time, it seems most people are workers. That's their job. Their laborers are paid for their work. They do a job, that kind of a thing. Slave labor is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
But then again,
it depends.
That's literally what everybody did.
It depends if you applied for the job or not.
Yeah. Well, it depends if you're paid for the job.
That's true.
Because plenty of people could apply for a job and then you're an intern.
But that's why the beer came in. They were paid with bread and beer.
Yep. Well, because in countries, especially like in any culture where there's no coin, and coin is not a common thing back then necessarily. Like they did have some, but what do you spend your money on? A house, food, and stuff. Well, if they provide the house, the food, and the stuff, you don't need the money.
That's right.
Oh, God, I'm going to get called a socialist again. But really, that's all you need money for, is to buy the things that you need. If they're providing the things you need, that's just an exchange of service for goods, which is how society has always worked.
Okay.
Throwing in the money thing is just an extra step in the exchange for services and goods. So Thutmose has inherited this concept of an organized, trained, paid, professional military. These guys are killers. That is their job. But they fight in disciplined units. A lot of the time back then, war was individual warriors going out and trying to kill each other, not necessarily working as a cohesive unit, because fights would break into, I'm fighting you, you're fighting me. A lot of combat was based around that, whereas he's much more, we work together, make shield walls, fight like this, throw spears, fire at once.
March in a straight line.
And this is becoming like a really developing concept. Like people have done this forever where it's, well, all you guys go do this thing and all you guys do that thing, but most fights broke up. These guys believe in we work together as a unit to win because they're trained to do that. Everybody else is just kind of trained. You use this weapon, not necessarily you use this weapon, work next to the guy next to you. They would even have a system of shield bearers for the archers. So these guys' job, all his job was protect the guy next to him, not focusing on anything other than total defense, which is a huge level of trust. To just be able to go, yep, I can shoot, and I know this guy has me protected no matter what.
Sure.
So that's huge, and you have to train a lot for
Right.
that. You don't just be like, okay, spear guy, shield guy, bow guy. Shield guy, protect the bow guy. Okay, how? Just go. It'll come to you. You'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out. Yeah.
So
Watch out for pointy things.
we're going to talk a little bit about the equipment of the time because I think it's insane.
Okay.
He has an army of like 10,000 men, which is a huge amount of people to get together for anything at any time in history.
It's bigger than Woodstock.
Bigger than Woodstock. Is it bigger than
I don't
Woodstock?
know.
I think
Actually,
Woodstock was 100,000.
I honestly don't know.
It's a million. But he has 10,000 infantry. They said it was between 10 and 20, but at the battle itself, it's listed as 10,000. So I'm just going to say it's 10,000.
Okay.
But he has 1,000 chariots. And at this time, chariots had become a thing. They were there's an argument whether they were developed by the Egyptians or they took it from the Hyksos people when they had their fight. But either way, it's used as a mobile fighting platform.
Yeah.
You don't just run people over. You've got a guy with a bow. And we have a picture of it right.
Oh.
Boop.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is Ramses II, who's a later king. He's the Moses guy. That's what he's famous.
Yes, Moses guy.
He's Yul Brenner. So this guy.
Okay.
Because I gotta have a picture of Yul Brenner just throwing his hat and being mad. They flooded my army. Why do we have a Russian as an Egyptian?
I don't know.
king?
He'd almost slipped into Arnold Schwarzenegger too. So.
Well, he's a weird. Yeah, that would have been great. Arnold as Ramses. I like it. It's
sure.
like
You want
somebody
me-
shoot Moses in the face with the bow.
You want me to let your people go? I say no. They stay.
Get to the Holy Land. Wrong guy.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anywho, so the concept of the chariot archer is a big deal for the Egyptians. They're mobile. They're just riding around. Pew, 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 pew.
Yeah, that's gotta be scary if you're on the side without a chariot.
Yes, that would suck so much, and
Yeah.
you don't want to get close to it. Like I don't know if any of you have ever walked next to like a wagon that's moving quickly.
Oh yeah, the spokes.
The spokes are like that's kind of like I don't know what's going on. The horses are huge.
Oh, you're driving by a truck and it's got little spiky things.
Yes, I hate
Yeah,
that.
I
I
do
hate
too.
that. Like especially a big semi and it's got the spikes.
Yeah.
So this is I mean they're not super heavy because they need the horses to be kind of mobile, and
Right.
some of these were pulled by one horse, some of them pulled by two. Two seems more common. So you've got a driver whose whole job is just making sure we go from point A to point B, and then you have the archer / warrior. They would probably be able to fight with a hand weapon if they got too close.
Sure.
You don't want some guy crawling up the back like I don't have a weapon.
You're right.
Stabby, stabby, stabby.
Stab him with an arrow.
And at the time, the bow they use is called a compound bow. Now, a compound bow is different than just a normal piece of wood with a string on it. A compound bow is several layers of wood and usually horn laminated together to make it more springy.
Oh.
And it can be a little smaller. It's a little more compact,
Yep.
but it pulls a lot harder and it can fire a lot further.
How would they put the wood together?
They
Do they
would
have
use
glue?
sap or types of glue. Yeah. And it's a process. It's a really
Sure.
complex, cool system. What's really wild about it is it developed in different parts of the world at around kind of the same time and completely independent of each other.
That's crazy.
China started doing it. Japan started doing it. They're on an island. It's parts of Africa are doing it. I think it was also a thing in the Americas. Not in South America. They tended to use sling or thrown weapons a lot more, I think, because the terrain probably wasn't great for
Okay.
shooting arrows because it's all jungle and death.
Yeah.
I
I guess once you figure out how to launch a thing,
how to make the thing better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just be where because it's different pieces put together. What if the glue isn't good?
That's what I was
it
thinking.
snaps apart and you just die. Like my bow broke.
Yeah. Only learned that lesson once.
Exact. And yeah, the guy next to you learns.
Sure.
Generational. It's like, don't do what he did. But yeah, they had all different types of ways of basically rendering down different types of sap. I'm trying to think what else they would use. But the idea is you bind it together and it stays like that for a long time while it cures, and you glue these pieces together. And then sometimes they use like the ends of the bows or like the tips of horns, and that binds it all together. So you've got like 3 pieces, converging, and then you have this piece hold it, and then you wrap the handle so that binds it.
Oh, sure, you can wrap it.
And then you wrap it there, and that binds it. Sometimes they completely coat them. For really fancy ones, they put fancy metals on them just because they're signs of wealth.
Sure.
Bind them in gold, which is awesome. I'd show a picture of it, but they're not around anymore because they're 3,000-year-old bows.
Okay.
But
use your imagination.
Use your imagination. It's just a commonplace bow. I didn't want to post it, but we can use the idea of the picture that we showed of Ramses on the chariot.
No, sure.
Is kind of the general idea. It's not a huge bow like a long bow that we see like the English use in later wars, where that is just one like piece and it's huge. These would be smaller and more mobile.
Okay.
Was also really fascinating, and I didn't even know the Egyptians use this, is they have horse archers. So it's just a dude riding around on a horse with a bow, but they don't have stirrups.
Oh.
You don't have a place to put your feet. So they're riding on basically a towel on the back of a horse.
Strong thighs.
Galloping and shooting.
Yeah.
I don't know if they shot mid-ride or if they stopped to shoot, but
or if they're just terrible shots.
They're just terrible shots, but still, it's arrows flying everywhere, so it doesn't really matter.
Yes.
But they're apparently very effective.
Okay.
They're used as scouts, and they could take out like scouting other scouts, and they were used to like attack the flanks of things. They're not like a major charge in and hit things because they don't have stirrups.
Right.
You get bumped and you fall off the horse. Shock cavalry is not a thing until we have a stirrup. Once we get the stirrup involved, then the knight is terrifying.
Get the stirrups, boys. All right.
Get the stirrups. Now for weapons, like I said, we got the bow.
Yeah.
It's great. We have the spear. That's a classic
Pointy
choice.
stick.
Now, this is my favorite thing. They have what's called a khopesh. Khopesh. It's this. It's a sword. This was developed actually out of a battle axe. The Egyptians liked axes, but they thought, what's better than an axe where every part of the axe is sharp.
Oh, including the handle?
Well, except the handle.
Okay.
So it's because you don't see the picture yet. It's a long chunk of metal. Well, not long. These things are like 24 inches long, which is difficult to do when you can only work in bronze. But it's got a straight part and then a hook at the end, and it's edged all the way through. And they would use the hook to like catch the enemy's shields or parts of them and slash. So it was a combination of a sword and a battle axe mixed together. Okay. It was an incredibly effective weapon.
Sure.
And if you're riding by and you're the guy on the chariot and you whack somebody with that, they're coming apart. The other main piece of equipment was the shield.
Okay.
Now, Oxford did an amazing study on this I thought was really cool. They did a bronze shield versus a leather shield made using the same techniques.
Oh.
The leather shield's better. The bronze shield...
Probably lighter, too.
It's way lighter. Like... This is a desert.
Yeah.
There's a lot of desert. It's very hot. So carrying around lots of metal stuff sucks, which is why they didn't like the axe as much because it was tended to be heavy. A sword you can make a lot lighter because it's thinner. Spears are common because you're holding the haft of a spear is wood as opposed to metal. That's hot. And you want to be able to move lightly, quickly, and be able to fight still. If you're fighting in armor in these conditions, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Like we see later on in history, talked about the Battle of Hattin with the Crusaders, where they're like steaming inside of their armor. They're wearing like a layer of felt and then chainmail and then a steel bucket on your head, and then you got a shield. It's just like, and there's no water for miles. Just kill me. This is stupid.
Good thing we're fighting for Jesus.
Yeah. Jesus, could you give me a drink? Busy. I turn it all into wine. That doesn't help. I'm dying of thirst. And you're like, well, Sir Jim is hallucinating because he keeps talking to Jesus and he is obviously dehydrated.
Yeah.
So the Egyptians, they had this lighter shield.
Yeah. No armor either, right?
Yeah. None. That's the next bit I was going to get into because it's insane. So the shield is probably leather, but it might have bits of bronze on it. That's usually a wealth thing for these guys because you don't need the armor. It's just too hot.
Yeah.
Even the pharaoh would wear armor, but that was more a status thing. And also, still like, all right, you just stand in a chariot, dude, and don't die. Don't die. And we need you to not die, so here's some fancy armor. But it was like gold. So gold does not deflect anything.
No, it's a soft
if I
metal, right?
hit you with an axe and you're in gold armor, I'm going to hit you. The armor's just going to
I will have a
crumple.
gold-plated wound.
It'll look great. And so, yeah, that was mostly it, is they would wear, like, gem-encrusted, cool-looking armor.
Yeah.
But even, and again, Ramses is a great example because we have, like, a lot of pictures of him carved out of him. Not out of him. Carved of him. There. He'd just go into battle bare-chested. They'd wear, like, a girdle, so just like a leather belt, because that kind of protects some vitals.
Soft parts?
Well, yeah, it protects the soft parts. You've got ribs.
Yeah.
So that'll stop stuff. That's what it's designed for. So then they're like, okay, really thick leather belt with some gems in it or scaled bronze on it. It looks neat, you know, and it keeps your pants up.
Sure.
And you can have a place to hang your weapon. There, girdle. So that's like it. The Egyptians literally wore to battle like a kilt that barely covered their privates. That was it.
Yeah.
So
and they rode a horse that way?
Some of them rode horses that way. They're riding on chariots, which kick up dirt. They didn't wear helmets either, because helmets are heavy.
Yeah.
And they largely just got in the way. The only person who always wears a helmet in every single depiction in every story, the pharaoh always wears like a blue crown.
Ooh.
And it's this really intricate helmet that's like gem encrusted and made of bronze, and then it's cured to have this blue look. And the blue is a very important thing, 'cause it's, I think, symbol of the gods and the heavens.
Yeah, okay.
So that's part of that. So anytime you see like a hieroglyph and somebody's got a blue hat, that is always a pharaoh. That's like a...
Do the hieroglyphs have... yes, they do have colors.
Some of them have colors still.
Okay.
Which is amazing. What ink are they using? I wash a shirt 3 times and it loses its color.
I don't know.
These guys are like, we made this
So also
4,000 years ago.
Is there also a thing where the color blue wasn't a concept?
Blue was... Yes, there was a period of time where blue wasn't a thing. They didn't have a word for it because you just didn't get it. So like in the Iliad, they refer to the sea as wine-colored. Yeah, and that's not wine, it's red. They're like, well, we don't have a word for it. Meh. So for different types of, or different parts of history, people don't have a word for blue.
Right.
Which is just wild to me because
strange.
it's always been around.
Yeah.
We've got the sky. That's how it always...
It's a big color.
Look, it's a big color. Yeah. But they might have just used different terms for it. But yeah, so it was also a really, like, not naturally occurring, difficult to get color.
Sure.
Even if you could find flowers like that, they didn't necessarily process the color and stay that way. So him getting this, lapis lazuli is a very common used stone to have this color.
Say it again.
Lapis lazuli. And it's a semi-precious stone, but like they would use it in mosaics, and maybe they ground it up and used it to cure the metal. That would be a good guess, I think, for how they did it. I'm sure experts know how they would achieve this.
Yes. Maybe someone will tell us.
Maybe somebody will tell us. So the pharaoh's the only guy with a way to protect his skull. Now, the soldiers probably wore head wraps and scarves, like we see. You know, you always see like the white and the red kind of big headdress thing. They probably wore that because it's so freaking hot.
Yeah.
You still would wear a hat, so they're not just walking around with no head protection from the sun. But that kind of tells you a lot about, like, they're more concerned about the sky killing them than anybody else.
Well, you can feel it constantly killing you, I guess.
Constantly, slowly sucking the life out of you. But what's wild to me is these guys are going into battle bare-chested with just a little skirt and probably some kind of wrapping under it to keep all your stuff together.
Yeah, true. Gotta keep the stuff together.
Some, what they called light webbing, so maybe like some leather straps across to like hold your shield and your gear. But
these are some sexy-looking
soldiers. Yeah, right. So the movie 300, which gave the worst depiction of what the Spartans looked like, because the Spartans wore heavy bronze armor, that was their thing. That's actually kind of close to what the Egyptians wore. It's like a little skirt thing to kind of cover up your soft
nether regions.
A hat that was not armored, a shield, and then whatever weapon you're using. Unless you're an archer, then no shield.
Right, because you need both hands.
You need both hands. Some shield guys would have like just a strap holding the shield, and it was kind of a passive defense.
Okay.
So you could like two-hand a spear or maybe a big axe. maybe for archery, but that would still kind of get in the way. So
Yeah,
you'd probably just still have a shield bearer. So those are our weapons. We got the awesome Khopesh, which I love. That's just the coolest sword ever. Just nasty and really cool.
Yeah, if you're on the correct end of it.
If you're on the correct, yeah, if you're on the right side of it.
Hey man, nice Khopesh.
Because it'd probably just be a horrific wound, like no matter what. And it doesn't have like a point. The tip of it is flat. So they don't stab with it. It's all just hacking wounds.
Slashing.
And that's just made to just cleave people apart. So you've got basically naked people. Their only defense is their skill.
Okay.
That's it.
That makes things fair.
And I think that's awesome because these guys are like, yeah, let's fight. And I would think if you have two armies like that, everybody dies. Because they have no protection.
Sure. Well, not everyone. There's like one person left. Right?
Yeah, they have like one guy. You have one guy. You got the guy with the hat. He's left because he's the only one who protected his head.
There you go.
But it speaks to like how determined you had to be to kill somebody. But also there's a massive amount of bravery of I am just me. And all I've got is the equivalent of a sharp stick and a flat thing. And I'm going to survive. And you have to be really good or really lucky or probably both to survive these things. So that's what the Egyptians are wearing. Now, their rivals are probably wearing similar stuff.
Okay.
Don't have as clear of a depiction of it. They might have some armor. They might have light shirts or robes at best. They're not wearing heavy armor either because this is a hellscape. This is just hot. You've been there. It's warm. It was always warm.
Yeah.
I think that's why people in that area fight so much is because it's just so hot.
And sand gets everywhere.
It gets everywhere. It's like it is the perfect environment to breed animosity.
Yeah.
If everything is green and happy and lush, you might have somebody who's a jerk. But if it's always hot, it's always sandy, and life is difficult, you're going to get crabby and you're probably going to stab somebody. So that's what this is. So Thutmose is leading his army there. He gets to Gaza and he immediately sends out his scouts, who are like those horsemen we talked about. Maybe light infantry, which I don't know why they called them light infantry because that's all his infantry. He does not have heavy infantry. The idea of heavy infantry is stupid. You're just going to die.
So they probably just call it.
I think they call them, it's just infantry. Yeah. It's just guys.
Guys. Probably not even.
There's chariots, there's horse archers, and then there's everybody. There's the guys. There's the guys.
Good. On a chessboard, you got all those pawns.
Yep, pawns. And you can't win without the pawns. Try winning chess without pawns.
Ooh,
it's
that'd be
terrible.
fun.
Yeah, take the pawns out and just go. You're not allowed to move them. So they just get in the way.
Oh.
You can't move it. You can only move the knights.
That'd be awful.
That would be the worst. Like, yeah, well, I got to win with two pieces. This is crap. Or wait till somebody kills your pawns. Then you can go. For those who don't know how to play chess, I'm judging you. Yeah, that's right. I'm judging you. Okay. Or the people in your life that didn't teach you because somebody should have, because it's a great game.
If you want to learn how to play chess, I'll teach you. I'm not good at it, but I know how to play it.
I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm great at chess. I get crushed regularly, but I know how the pieces move, and that's important. Now, Thutmose is in Gaza with his army. He's got his scouts going out, and they say there's 3 routes to Megiddo. All right.
Yes.
2 of them are wide open and safe. They'll might take a little longer, but they're better for moving the army. The other one is so narrow we can get one guy through at a time in single file. It's way faster.
Sure.
But it's all they have to do is have like 50 guys stand at the end and they'll kill us all.
Yeah.
Don't go that way.
Don't go that way.
So Thutmose says, I'm going that way.
Yeah.
Because if you guys think this is a better idea,
he's like Robert Frost taking the road less traveled.
Yes. It's very much if my generals think that's a stupid idea, then so do the other generals. And if everybody thinks it's a stupid idea, they're not going to bother defending it because they're going to think, obviously he's not going that way because that's suicide. So why bother?
Yeah.
So I'm going that way.
But I'm crazy like a fox.
I'm crazy like a fox. Now his generals are like, if anything goes wrong, you're all going to, everyone's going to die.
One at a time,
people don't want to go that way. So Thutmose says, well, I'll lead them myself then.
Oh.
So the king of kings, the descendant of gods, leads his men through the pass in the front.
All right.
Maybe not the front because he's got to have some scouts going out. But he's not in the middle. He's right there with his guys, which is awesome. And I mean, how many times have we talked about this where the general's just like, go kill everybody.
Yeah.
Girl, good job. He's like, nope, let's go. I got no pants on and no shirt and I got a hat. Let's do this.
Let's squeeze through this tight space.
So he's a badass. Like he's brave. And he being raised this way, he knows he's mortal. Like he's not like, oh yeah, I'm invincible. Like he watched his dad die, and his dad died when he was 2.
He's starting to question this whole God thing.
Yeah, he's like, I think he gets like we have like divine blood, but it's super watered down. So it just means that we're just supposed to like lead.
Sure.
But it doesn't necessarily make the rivers flow.
Yeah.
But maybe they flow just because I exist.
Yeah, that's got to be a mess with your
it's
mind.
It's a lot
of
pressure, especially since he's like raised from baby to that.
Yeah.
But he at least knows that like what's going to get him through the fight is his skill, not being a god.
Right.
So he's in there. He knows his guys will follow him, and he just sends out his horsemen and his infantry like in little groups, and they kill what are called pickets, who are like the little scouts that like stand. So you got scouts that move around to check things out, and then pickets are like, we sit here and we wait to see if people are coming through, and then we can go report back. So he kills all of these little picket groups, and then gets into the valley that he needs to get to at the base of Megiddo, and he looks up, and there's the fortress, and way over there is one group of enemies, and way over there is another group of enemies, and he's like, ha! You guys guarded the wrong spot. Let's go.
One at a time.
Yep, so his guys come charging through this little narrow gap, and he suddenly is in the valley, and the kings of Kadesh and Megiddo are like, oh crap, he did the suicide thing, and he killed all our little... this guy's good. Yeah. Crap. So they grab their army, which is about the same size as his. Which I love that they didn't go like, we fought an army of 850,000 dudes and there were only 10,000 of us. We killed everything. So it's a very credible thing. Difference being, his guys are professional troops who are all trained as the same army. These guys come from different countries. They don't even speak the same language, some of them. Right. Some are tribesmen. Because it was mostly Megiddo and Kadesh, but they also recruited from the tribes of the Mitanni and the Amuru, who are kind of local people that live nearby, but they're not like these same types of folk. Yeah. They're just a different tribe. So again, light armored people, but not conquerors, not hardened fighters. But they have like the same military compositions. Like 10,000 guys and 1,000 chariots is what they say both armies were. So Kadesh and Megiddo form up, and they're like, yeah, let's fight. And Egypt lines their troops up, and they camp for the night. It's like the end of the day, and you don't want to start fighting at night. Yeah. And while everybody is sleeping, he moves his camp way closer to the enemy. So they wake up and like, oh, crap, they're right there. And immediately in the morning, the Egyptians get out of bed, and they just charge across the field. Now, he sets it up so that he's in the middle, which is the most dangerous part.
This guy, the balls of this guy.
I love this guy. And he's an obvious target because he's the only blue head in the whole military. So they'll kill that guy. So he's in the middle. He's like, I'm a king, let's kill him. And I don't know if he's on foot or he's probably on a chariot just so he can see what the heck is going on. Yeah. So he's probably riding around shooting people. Like, that's what I imagine his battlefield role. He's like, all right, go. Get this. All right, my turn. Pew, pew. And he seems to put all of his cavalry, his horsemen, and his chariots on the left flank. They're way faster. They're described as being more maneuverable. And they flank the enemy and just crush them. And then his guys crush the center. And basically everyone goes, we didn't expect all of this. Holy crap. And they run away. Yay. So the army that is closest to Megiddo, they run up the hill and go into the fortress, which is considered like impregnable. Sure. Yeah. They're because they don't have catapults, they don't have cannons or anything like that. If you want to take a city, you have to climb it. Yeah. Or maybe knock the gate down.
And we're gonna drop stuff on you.
And we're gonna drop stuff on you the whole time. Gravity just is a mother. Yeah. I just dropped this thing. He's dead. Great job. They're throwing ceiling, not ceiling tiles, but roofing tiles.
Anything.
Yeah. Just
pennies.
There was a guy we talked about. I think he was a Roman who got killed by a roofing tile. So he's just like, screw you. Piff, and he died. Yeah. I don't remember what that was, but I thought it was hilarious. It's just some old lady mad that one of her sons died. Just, get out of my city. So they win the battle. Unfortunately, the Egyptian army is like, ooh, enemy camp. That's where all their stuff is. Yeah. So they just go into the camp and start looting it. which is what you did at the time.
Right.
This means they don't follow through and wipe out the enemy.
Oh, you got to have follow through.
They don't follow through, so what happens is the army that they crushed reforms and then just all goes in the city. And they're like, well, we're not leaving. So what should have been like a one and done, we're over that fight, turns into a 7-month siege.
Oh, no.
While the Egyptians just surround the city, they build a moat around it so nobody can escape. They have a couple of assaults, but mostly they just starve them out, and eventually the city surrenders. The king of Kadesh still manages to escape and run home.
Okay, bye.
That guy who started the whole thing, he's like, I'm out! Deuces! They take the city. The result of this is that this is the start of his military career, and this is the biggest battle that Thutmose fights. He goes on to fight 17 campaigns in over 20 years and conquers 350 cities.
Wow.
He is considered the Napoleon of Egypt. He's like one of the greatest conquerors of all time, who is also a fairly wise king. He, fortunately for the rest of the world, only ruled until he was in his 50s, and then he died. Oh. He's constantly fighting and killing things, so he probably just exhausted himself. Now here's I got a list of spoils. This is how detailed their records are. And all these records come specifically from, I want to get this guy's name. I know my time is up, but I'm gonna. This is cool because there's a hook at the end, just like a Kopesh. There was a scribe. His name was Tjaneni. It's Tjaneni, and I think that is a tia sound, so it's Tjanini or Tjaneni.
Right.
It could be Tahneni. That actually sounds more Egyptian. Sure. He was Thutmose's personal scribe. So he wrote everything down every single day. And then when they were all done with this, at the end of Thutmose's career, he said, take all of his notes and put it on a wall.
Nice.
So we have all of this. And it's cool because, like they say, their spoils were 340 prisoners, 2,041 mares. It's very specific. 191 foals, 6 stallions. So they're like really specific about the horses. 924 chariots, 200 suits of armor, 502 bows, 1,929 cattle, 22,500 sheep, and the royal armor, chariot, and tent poles of the king of Megiddo. Because
and the partridge in a pear tree.
I thought the tent poles was a nice touch because, like, oh, those probably are like gold and inlaid. Like, this is where the king's everything is nice. They're like, oh, it's just poles. No. It's probably like super expensive. Yeah. Now, this is the start of his campaigning. He consolidates the whole region, and then he just kicks butt for the next 20-odd years. Here's the wrinkle. The area around the city was called a har, which is a hill. Mm-hmm. So it's Har Megiddo. Armageddon.
Oh.
The term Armageddon comes from this city. Huh. It is mentioned in Revelations. This is supposed to be the site of the final battle.
Oh, okay.
So in a lot of the Abrahamic faiths, when they talk about the end of days and the final battle, it's here at this spot. Huh. This is also the first recorded battle with any accuracy.
Probably
every other battle that has occurred throughout history before this, we're like, this is the first time somebody kept specific, reliable, good data on it.
Yeah, you probably should have led with that.
No, I wanted that to be the conclusion.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So the conclusion is like, this is considered like the first legitimate, trustworthy battle where we know every single thing happened the way it did because it's recorded well by all sides.
So we started with Armageddon.
Yeah, the first battle's Armageddon.
Yes.
We got we're going to start that way. We're going to end that way. That's the theory. Is that, and then there were a couple more battles that took place here. There was one. Yeah. I think the last one was in World War I. Might have been World War II, but I think it was World War I. Was the Battle of Megiddo. So there have been a few. And to this day, it is a preserved historical site right here. It's an aerial view of it. Mm-hmm. Source of tons of information about the time. And it's literally just society piled on top of society. It's a historical site, global historical site. I think it was in 2003 or 2008 that it was made like a global heritage site, which is cool. So it's preserved and protected. But yeah, a lot of people believe that when stuff goes down, that's where it's going to go down. I think even in the book Good Omens, I believe Megiddo they're planning like the final battle. It's a great hysterically funny book by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, and it's about the end of days. And Megiddo is like the site. This is where it's supposed to happen. The Antichrist is supposed to show up in massive battle. So that's the Battle of Megiddo, the first recorded with reliability battle in history, and Armageddon.
Well, there we go.
That's awesome.
Start with Armageddon, end with Armageddon.
Yep, love it.
All right. Well, thanks there, Will, for that insightful information.
You're welcome, Mike. Glad to provide it. That was a fun one for
We
me.
hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed giving it to you. If you have any corrections or tell us anything we were confused about, feel free to leave it in the comments.
If you know how they made the blue hat, tell me. That sounds, I want to know.
Obviously, like and subscribe. It seems like every week we get one more subscriber. So just
you guys are doing your thing.
How about you be the one this week?
Yeah, you be the one this week, or share it with. Just be like, dude, I got 3 good friends, and none of you are subscribed. This is great. Subscribe, even if you don't like it. Subscribe anyway.
Yeah, it costs nothing.
Costs you nothing. Takes up none of your time, and it means the world to us.
It sure does. And we're going to be doing this again next week. And next week we're going to be discussing the
Patsy. The Patsy conspiracy. The Patsy conspiracy. It might be Patsy, but it
takes place roughly 3,000 years after this one.
It's
today.
Almost the flip. It's 26th April, 1478.
There we go. Well, join us next week for that. I know nothing about that one either.
I'm excited about that one too.
All right. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.